Have you ever seen some of the weird and sometimes wonderful Glassdoor reviews about your employer? Well, in today's video, I'm going to react to some of the best from my employer, Google. Yep, so having worked at Google for almost 2 years now, I'm going to react to these reviews and debust some of the myths and go through some of the truths and just give my kind of thoughts and reactions on these reviews. Let's take a look and see what we can find. First thing I noticed, look, the reviews are pretty good. For a big company, Google has an average rating of 4.5 out of 5, and the approval of the CEO rating of Sundar is 95%. Like, that's pretty great, right? Can't get much better than that. Do I think Sundar is a great CEO? If I say no, I'll probably get fired. No, I'm joking. But no, like, I think generally, like, Sundar is a well-respected CEO in Google. He also came from like an engineering role and worked his way up like over time. And he's also like quite open internally and also externally. So he's like a crucial part of the company, obviously being CEO, but he still kind of allows himself up time for questions and also just events and things like that. So overall, I think that's a fair reflection. Okay, let's look at the reviews. So first up, we've got a review of a marketing assistant in London who says that there is great benefits, welcoming team, good culture and mental health support. And the cons are that there is busy/high workloads, having to work over the weekend and evenings to get the job done. Alright, yeah, I think this is like pretty reasonable. Great benefits and welcoming team, free food, free drink, free gym, free swimming pool, free private medical, free flu jab. Google's got it. Good culture and good mental health support. Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. Like Google has a full mental health package now as part of the private medical insurance, and even like a long COVID support package too. In terms of the cons, like busy, high workload and having to work on the weekend and evening to get the job done. I think this is kind of like dependent upon the part within Google that you're in. Personally, I'm a massive work-life balance fan, and particularly in my team, we're like big on the whole work-life balance, like finish at like 5, half 5, 6 o'clock time. So realistically, I think, you know, this is definitely fair. I can imagine that some teams are particularly busy. This person works in marketing, so if they're launching a lot of new products, I can imagine in the ramp up to that, it can get busy. Obviously with Google, there's a lot of stuff happening. Okay, this is, don't really know how to react to this one, to be honest. A Buddha's face with Scorpion's heart. Wow, okay. This is interesting. Used to be the offices, now it's just the stock of the Pro. I guess obviously they wrote this in COVID, so definitely you can see that office culture is like kind of centered around the office. Now it's just the stock. Yeah, you know, the Google stock and compensation is fairly generous, but obviously it depends on what role you do. Increasingly bad management, hypocritical, says they're Googled, but assumes that means Googly. Then behave worse than the big American corporate evils like Amazon. Don't care 2 licks for their employees. Okay. So if the title didn't give this away, because it definitely didn't to me, this is a 1-star review of Google. Of someone who worked at Google for more than 3 years. So obviously this is their opinion and they're totally entitled to it. In terms of like management and whether they feel supported or not and behave worse than Amazon, I can't necessarily comment on Amazon. I have never worked at Amazon. I don't know that much experience of working there, but I do feel supported. I think it, you know, massively depends on the different teams within Google. I can imagine some teams are great and some teams are amazing and some teams are probably okay. There's definitely going to be a variation. It's a massive company, right? You know, increasingly bad management, like behaving worse than Amazon. I don't know. Like, obviously Amazon doesn't necessarily have the best name in terms of how they treat employees, particularly those who work in the factories, but generally, like on the whole, I mean, Google doesn't really have those kind of like positions either, so it's kind of hard to compare those where Amazon potentially has the like higher dissatisfaction rates, although I don't know that for sure. But no, I think like generally Google is a pretty supportive company. I think it does depend on the manager that you have for sure, and in terms of if they're more supportive or not than others. But also in this kind of situation, like it's a case of like asking for help sometimes. Like you know, Google can provide all the benefits and all the offerings that they want to, but if you don't put your hand up to say like, hey man, I need some like mental health support, or I need some time off, or I need some carers leave, then you know, offering all the stuff can only go so far if you're not the one putting your hand up saying, "Hey, I need this help." But yeah, Buddha's face with a scorpion's heart. That is, that's one I've not heard of before. All right, but boring. Constantly on your feet, good pay, feels like a real family attitude. All right, but you feel overworked and underappreciated at times, and there's confusing technologies. Yeah, this one's quite interesting because they've got confusing technologies as a con, which, you know, Google definitely can be bad at. But I think when you work for a technology company, whatever technology company it's going to be, you have to kind of embrace that ambiguity, embrace the fact that there is going to be lots of different technologies. And also, like, once you get used to all the different technologies that you use within Google, honestly, it's not so bad at all. And also the contrast here, right? Previous review is saying about like confusing technologies. This review, great technology, great IT, it just works, really committed people, great compensation, great technology. So, see, there's a bit of a contrast, right? I think, you know, definitely the technology at Google is pretty great. It's probably some of the best in the world. Google doesn't necessarily always do a great job of naming those different technologies. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, like another con here, like late nights interacting with West Coast colleagues and high performance demands. Kind of depends where you're based, right? Like obviously this person works a lot with people in San Francisco, which is where the main office is in California. And obviously they're based in London, England, same as me. However, if you are going to be working with those colleagues, like realistically, you're going to be probably working 6, 7, 8, 9 p.m. at night in your local time. That's probably just like the nature of that team. Obviously, different teams within Google are completely global, but that's obviously something that I would check before I was working for that team, just to figure out those time zones, because it's the kind of job where in that team you'd probably be working from like 12 p.m. till like 8 p.m. your local time. However, maybe you want to do that and you want to have mornings off. So works for some people, works not for others. So they've left some advice to management, advice to Sundar here. Keep doing the things that make Google great. Be great to go with flexible working and liking the very expensive performance management process. So they're talking about the process within Google called perf, which is basically the time where everyone is just like evaluating each other as employees. And that happens like once or twice a year, I think. I agree on the flexible working point. Google's kind of been like somewhat flexible, somewhat not flexible. Some companies like Twitter have just come out and said you can work wherever the hell you want. You can work remotely if you want to, just submit a work remote request. Google's gone somewhat flexible here, and they've said that you need to be in the office 3 days a week, and then you can work 2 days from home, and that you can have the chance to apply to work remotely, although they expect that most people will work in the office like as normal before. I think they potentially could have gone one step further in terms of like just allowing people to work remotely if they wanted to, and not necessarily have to go through like an approval process. However, I also understand the fact that a lot of Google culture centers around the office, particularly a lot of like the perks and the benefits, like the, you know, physical on-site stuff like food, gym, swimming pool, and all that kind of stuff. So I understand that point of view. But yeah, no, things can always be made more flexible, right? Look at this. First class company culture and inclusivity. The perks, opportunities, culture, and people's options for learning, developing, and progressing professionally, be a mouthful, are heavily prioritised. It's a great place to work. Yep, that sounds fair. And this does link back to the fact that lifelong learning is inherently googly. It's like a core principle of working at Google. And I actually mentioned this in the Google Perks video that I posted. Check out the pop-up banner here if you want to learn a little bit more about the perks of working at Google. Yeah, this person also here mentions around like the downsides of working at Google in terms of like work-life balance can suffer. I think the nature of Google is that everyone works bloody hard, right? Everyone is kind of working at Google because at the end of the day, the Google selection process is like tough. Like there's a lot of interviews. So on the whole, the people who come into Google are really kind of like driven and will work hard to kind of achieve the outcomes for the company and for their own careers. So I think, yeah, work-life balance can become a challenge, but just really be crucial at setting the boundaries and having that open conversation with your manager. To a certain extent, it's a small price to pay if you're working on some really fun, exciting projects. Very hard to trade it for anything else, says this person. 5-star, recommended, you know, CEO approval, great culture, people, perks, and the employability that comes with working at Google. 100%. Google is the kind of place where you could stay for 10 years and work in all different departments, all different teams, and all different orgs within Google. However, if you don't want to do that, you want to start your own company, you want to work for another company, there's probably like few companies in the world better than having Google on your CV. Like, it really does make a difference, and people I know who have gone from Google into other companies have honestly been able to get some pretty amazing opportunities. Last part, people management role at Google compared to other companies. I don't know. I have literally no experience with this whatsoever in terms of if it's hard to get a people management role at Google. So people management will probably be like HR or people operations, that kind of team, or maybe recruiting. Yeah, I have no idea. Honestly, I don't know anyone who's been trying to be a people manager, so it's hard for me to speak on that. But I have no idea about that, if it is difficult or not. Okay, this person, 4-star, software engineer. Pros, great work environment and benefits. Cons, very large company already and lost a bit of the startup culture. This is quite an interesting review, I think, because Google has thousands of people working for it in countries all around the world. Google is not even just its own company now, it's owned by another company called Alphabet. There's other companies that come from under Alphabet's like parent company. There's other companies within Google, for example, YouTube. So, you know, I can understand that some people think that Google has lost its startup culture. The team that I now work in is like a completely brand new team within Google. So, you know, I've only just recently moved to this team and we never existed before. So it kind of feels like a mini startup within Google. However, I can imagine if you're working on like a big product, like Gmail or search, for example, it probably does feel like a bigger company because you're probably in a team of like, I don't know, 100 people or maybe less, but it is going to be like a big corporate. Fundamentally, Google's not a startup anymore. Like, being realistic, it's not a startup and it hasn't been for like a good amount of years. However, I think there's like little startup pocket teams within Google that can give it more of that kind of like startup vibe. You just got to kind of find the teams. And generally the products that are newer, for example, like Stadia and Google Cloud, generally they're going to probably have more of a startup vibe as opposed to the products they've been going around for a lot longer. All right, so in summary, looking at these Glassdoor reviews, it seems like, you know, money is great, food is great, opportunity to work with really intelligent people is great, and working at Google is CV gold. Yeah, I would probably agree with like most of these points, like particularly the food's pretty great, you know. That's definitely a standout point. But yeah, I think you do get the opportunity to work with some really amazing people. The interview process is rigorous for a reason, to find the best kind of people to work at a company like Google. So definitely agree with all of that. So the cons, very slow and bureaucratic, minimal opportunity for internal progression, and overrun with some workplace politics and something weird about a Buddha and a scorpion. But no, I think like, you know, most of these concerns just stem from the fact that Google is a larger company now. Like, even with the best intentions, the best perks, the best systems in place, a company like Google, you can sometimes feel as if things are going to be moving a bit slower and a bit more bureaucratic, just because there is like lots of different levels and there has to be things that goes through approval. Because at the end of the day, when you're working on a product like Gmail and it's got like 1.5 billion people who actively use it like every single day, when you put out a new feature or a new change to that product, it's going to impact like a heck of a lot of people, right? You know, I get the fact that things are a little bit slower. Sometimes things need to go through approvals or a few different layers. However, I think, you know, with Google, if you want a true startup experience, Google's not necessarily going to be the true startup experience if you want to work for a company like that. However, within Google, you can find pockets of like startup culture within the company. Just look for the kind of newer teams and look for the newer products. This was really good fun. Hopefully you had as much fun as I did in reacting to these Glassdoor reviews. If you like this video, you'll probably love this video here, which is me unboxing a load of Google swag, which is like a key perk of working at Google, all the different swag that you get. So you'll probably love this video here. And if you don't want to watch this video, this is a video right here that YouTube thinks that you'll love from my channel. Awesome. Thanks so much for watching. Have a great day.